Hello there, Section 24. Happy to see you, or more accurately, to be seen. The date is October 21st, and it's my third video that I'm trying to put together for you. And I know it's vacation, mid-break, right? Mid-semester break, and you should be taking a break, but I feel this need to keep trying to connect to you and to keep helping you swerve, right, in the direction, in the wake of your professor, Chris Stark, needing to take a medical leave. So this is video number 3, and I probably will not burden you with another one this weekend. I can't stop talking, apparently, about literature. I'm trying to serve you as your teacher. I'll try to keep this to under half an hour. I've already made this video, but I didn't have my lavalier mic turned on, so now I'm doing it again, aren't I? It'll probably be even better. We'll start with business notes. I got a few quick ones. Won't take very long for that. And then I also, most often my classes are like an all-you-can-eat smorgasbord. If this one were said to be, be able to presume to have an entree, the big thing I want to do today is just try to give you some general ideas about how I think about literature, and I want to communicate those to you. And I'm, capable of, minutia and getting into the detail and stuff, but today I'd like to stay kind of above the terrain, above the topography of the terrain, so to speak, and make some big general remarks. Talk about, in particular, one great teacher that has had a lot of influence on me, and he's helping me keep my head down and my chin up during this crisis time, which is really what we're in this country and planet-wide, actually. And I don't think I'll be talking about anything too complicated, but I'll probably be thinking in a way that maybe you haven't before, because I want to be understood. I want you to know what kind of man and teacher I am. And then when I get near the end here, I want to talk about some of the monsters that are just attacking literature right now. Literature and the humanities and the liberal arts have fallen on very hard days. And some days, bad days, I feel like a man going down into hell with a glass of ice water. And but I got to stay hopeful. Faith, hope, and love. Those are the 3 big things that we got to keep before us. Before we do any of this cool stuff, before I teach you all kinds of amazing things, we got to start with a little bit of poetry. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I've already hosted Brenda Hillman. My next poet is Chris Abani on November 16th, a Nigerian guy. He's going to be reading behind my brand new Verse Like Water podium, and I hope you come. Haven't even told you about my new podium yet. And then I host Maider Vang, the Hmong poet, February 24th. And Kevin Young is who I want to put before you right now. Kevin Young is a big deal, and I had to get a big Minnesota State Arts Board grant to fund him, probably March-ish. We're working on a date right now with California. No poet's in more demand. He's the poetry editor of New Yorker magazine. He's a complete genius, and he's from the South. And he likes to write about, among other things, his family. And this is a poem about his aunts. And my quick editorial comment before I spin this is, I sometimes tell my students that there's a fine line between poetry and music. There isn't any line at all. It's the same thing. And listen to him here, partway through the poem, when he says the words, "Make way for no way." He is singing. He's absolutely singing. Check this out. This is a poem about his aunts.
Aunties, there's a way a woman will not relinquish her pocketbook, even pulled on stage or called up to the pulpit. There's a way only your auntie can make it taste right. Rice and gravy is a meal if my late great aunt Tuda cooks it. Aunts cook like there's no tomorrow, and they're right. Too hot is how my Aunt Tootie peppers everything. Her name given by my father for seeing her smiling in her crib. There's a barrel full of rainwater beside the house that my infant father will fall into, trying to see himself, the bottom. And there's his sister Margie yanking him out by his hair grown long as superstition. Never mind the fly swatter they chase you round the house and into the yard with, ready to whoop the daylights out of you. That's only a threat. Aunties will fix you potato salad and save you some. godmothers, godsends, aunts smoke like it's going out of style, and it is. Make even gold teeth look right, shining, saying, I'll be John, with a sigh. Make way out of no way. Keep the key to the scale that weighed the cotton, the cane we raised more than our share of. If not them, then who will win heaven? Holding tight to their pocketbooks at the pearly gates, just in case. Thanks.
Well, we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. I love similes. I collect similes and metaphors, and I love my favorite simile in that poem is his father's hair grown long as superstition. That's a great one. Okay, business notes. Put a picture of yourself up in D2L, a good one too, with your gaze in the screen. Don't put up a picture of you standing in a deer stand or barrel racing, if you barrel race. I got a couple barrel racers, Ellie and Bree Voller. Maybe you know those women. They put on helmets and race barrels. Just your face. I want to be able to see your face so I can get to know who you are. Most of you do not have pictures in D2L yet. It's easy. Pick out a good one. I was on the verge of doing what I'm basically going to do. I got to start over. I got to clean out D2L, and we're heading in a different direction. But I got a very thoughtful email from Emma Young, who I'm already getting to be friends with. And Emma wrote a courteous, professional, respectful email, and the gist of it was, I hope I'm not breaching too much confidentiality here, Emma J. Young. It basically argued, okay, look, I get it. New class, new teacher, a little bit of a catastrophe. It's actually a complete mess, actually, but I'll pull it together. She let me know that she had, for one of those journal entries, had written a lot. Kind of the main one, I think it's called Journals, Volume 1 or Part 1. And I went and peeked, and she had written like 15 pages, and she told me that she did not want that to go to waste. And I'm scratching my head going, okay, how do I do this? Some of them wrote it, some of them didn't. Everything's pretty confusing. And Emma and I had a little correspondence back and forth, and she and I made an executive decision that we both really like. In fact, we feel wonderful about ourselves, and this decision that Emma and I made, it's going to affect your lives. Here's the deal. Yes, I'm going scorched earth, and I'm going to clean out that D2L shell. But Emma and I decided that it would be perfectly fair to grab a little bit of what you've done and pull it forward. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that first journal entry, and I'm not going to preserve it, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create an assignment box this week, and I'd like you to go in there. And I could see that some of you wrote, 8, 10, some of you bordered on what she wrote, 15 plus pages. Well-written pages, by the way. And I'd like you to do this. I'm going to create an assignment folder, and it'll be our first assignment for the second half of this semester. Take whatever you got and put it in there. And if you didn't write anything, and a number of you didn't, well, it's time to get going, isn't it? Giddy up, get going. And I will give you points for that, lots of them. And I will also give you some feedback. I know Chris Stark told you that she wasn't going to read your journals, but I am. Every word, every single word, and I don't skim them. I don't type in responses to papers. I leave recordings. So I'll leave a little audio recording. I'll use that wave feature in D2L. And so for all your journal entries, and if we do a paper, and we might, you will get verbal feedback, and my students seem to appreciate that. I leave a 1 or 2 minute recording for everything because I can talk faster than I can type, although I'm super good at typing. So put up a picture of yourself. The journals are going to live, at least that assignment is, and you try to do a better job, a good job at getting feedback on your writing. Now, what I want to talk to you about today is something I hope you're interested in. It has to do with the idea of getting an education, becoming an educated person. And I'll just kind of return in thought to some days when I was right around 40. When I was right around 40 or so, I began to ask myself some very serious questions. What am I doing? What do I think I'm doing when I walk to the end of a hallway, I was in my old life, and open up a classroom door and go in and presume to be the teacher? I asked myself, what is an education? What is a real education? How is it achieved and for whom? What are the methods? What does it mean to participate in the human act of teaching and learning? And there's a lot of back and forthness there. And I kind of freaked myself out because I came to the conclusion, my 40-year-old brain did anyway, that teaching is the structuring of consciousness. And that made me a little bit nervous because that's a big job. What is consciousness? I'm not even saying I can identify it. What are the boundaries? What are the lines between our soul, our mind, our conscience, consciousness? And I got a little bit anxious, actually, although I'm not prone to fear. And then I went, wait a minute, don't freak out. The structuring of consciousness is not that complicated. You just provide good memories for students. And for me, the most important memories I can provide for students is to select great works of literary art and all kinds of art for them to enjoy. I decided that I just needed to keep doing what I was doing, and that was creating memories that have to do with great art, and great art is about beauty. Beauty is what I traffic in. Its source is God, but we try our best on earth to make artifacts, and this is a Greek way of thinking too, that represented by the things, all the great things that are in heaven. Now, there's a couple ways of thinking about this. On my end of it, I really feel like I have a solemn obligation to provide memories with art and beauty. And I do that in my classroom. I do it when I host a poetry reading and try to bring people together. I'll be doing it next week when I take my mythology lecture to the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. We're going down there on October 28th to be just completely crushed flat by 80,000 works of art. We'll never see them all. I ordered 150 tickets for Hamlet in the spring, and I only have time for the stuff that's great, masterpieces, classical works of the Western tradition. I got to talk about that a little bit today. On your end of it, let me get a little bit personal and talk about you. I think each and every one of you, if you haven't thought about this, start thinking about your aesthetic. Start thinking about your relationship to beauty. And maybe similarly, you should start thinking about the solemn obligation that you have to structure your own consciousness. And you've also got to be prudent and be careful. We're only here for a little while on earth. We live and die like characters in Shakespeare in just a few lines. And you've got to realize right now, I think most of you are young, you're probably all younger than me, what you consume is what you become, okay? What you put up there, what you take in with your heart and soul, and particularly in forms of entertainment, that's what's going to be up there. I'm not a fan of video games, okay? So just forgive that. Well, let's love each other through our differences. That's another one of my classroom rules. Let's love each other through our differences. But let's face facts. If you play video games all day long, I don't even know the names of them anymore. If you play a first-person shooter game like COD, whatever, that's what's going to be up there. That's all that's going to be in your head. It's a drastic example, but I think it's important to talk about. I'm not afraid to talk about anything. If you consume even a little bit of pornography, you are going to be filling your consciousness with that, and there's no unseeing it. And at your hearing, I'll proclaim that to be a demonic evil. Don't do it. Maybe don't. If that's what you take in all day, well, that's what's going to be up there. Now, on the other end of things, if you make, and we make together, great choices and pursue beauty and goodness and truth through great art, you're going to have something completely different up there. I think we should listen to great music, great classical music and jazz. Let's look at beautiful paintings together. Let's read some great literature together. Go to the dance performance. Look at that sculpture and stand there for a while and think about how long it took that, whoever that man or woman was that chiseled that. I think if we have shared experiences with great art, that's kind of one of my topics today, we're going to be more coherent as human beings, as a society. So think about that, will you? Now, I want to put before you a teacher that's been very influential on me, that really frames and informs the way I think about stuff, particularly in a classroom. This is the gaze, so to speak, of Harold Bloom, who died a couple years ago. Harold Bloom, as far as I'm concerned, is the greatest English teacher that this country has ever produced. But he's not everybody's hero, okay? This guy is my king. He taught at Harvard, he taught at NYU, and principally Shakespeare, for decades. And he's a complete genius. I have all his books, and he's a big deal to me. He apparently had a photographic memory. He had every single line of William Shakespeare memorized. That's almost 900,000 words, okay? Apparently, he had every play, every line of every scene of every act of every play committed to memory. And he could recite it at will. That's 37 plays. Apparently, he also had memorized the poetry of it's slipping my mind. Hart Crane, sorry. Oh, I had a little aphasic moment there, didn't I? Hart Crane. I can't shoot this a third time, so I'll edit that out. Bloom is not everybody's deal, though. Bloom actually is an incredible figure of controversy in this country, because in the late 80s, he read a book that I absolutely loved, and some people just hated on it. And this is the cover of it, because I left the book in my office up north. I was brandishing this in my classroom the other day. 87 or so, Bloom writes a book called The Western Canon. And it basically is a country-by-country look at all of the great writers that we have produced in recent centuries. Why did people get angry? Well, it was pretty heavily dependent on white males, dead white males as we call them. And as a future dead white male, I'm not going to overly defend them here, but I do have to let you know that the writers that we're going to be reading are going to be dead white males. But in self-defense, let me let you know this. When I create a poetry reading at Central Lakes College, and I'm going to do that until I stroke out someday in E339, hopefully a distant afternoon, I create a space where different voices can be heard. And they typically are not white. I got the list right here in front of me. I have hosted great internationally known poets who are black, queer, Latino, Chicano, Cuban American, Palestinian, Armenian, Iranian, Syrian, Jamaican, Nigerian, Native American, Indian, Chinese, Northern Ireland, and Belarusian. And this is going to only grow. Meanwhile, in my classroom, I create spaces where writers can be heard that are being canceled. Okay? Bloom argued a few important things. One of them is that we need to have great experiences, shared experiences with art, or we're going to fall apart. He didn't say read only these writers. He said have them be a kind of starting point, a point of departure. Bloom also argued that the center is not holding, that things are falling apart. And that was a prophetic line that he wrote in the late 80s when I was in my 20s. Bloom believed that it was a wonderful thing, century after century after century, where every country in Europe had a great poet that came forth to tell the story, that could be a pattern for all the men and women of that country. And I'm not going to name them all, but just take a look at this map. Spain has to this minute Miguel de Cervantes. He's the canonical or authoritative writer of Spain. France, probably Gustave Flaubert. England, of course, has Shakespeare. Russia has Dostoevsky as their great novelist. Could be Tolstoy. And their poet, the great national poet of Russia, is Pushkin. Italy had Dante. When he wrote the Divine Comedy, the greatest poem in the medieval period, he became Italy's canonical poet. America might be a little bit big for a canonical poet, but Bloom thinks that our poet, the poet that sings a song that we all can identify with, is the great Walt Whitman, one of the first hippies of American literature. All of this is being deconstructed and attacked. And I'll raise if I could drop another name, that's what English teachers do. I'd like to talk about a friend of mine named Deborah Appelman. She's written this book about what it's like to teach English while the culture wars are going on right now. And Deborah Appelman is kind of freaking out. I'm not a political person. I'm not trying to start up a political argument here. I believe in poetry, not politicians. But Deborah Appelman, who is a professor at Carleton, has realized late in her career that even though she's a very left-leaning liberal person, she realizes that literature, great literature, is completely under attack by not only the people on the right, but the people on the left. And books are getting canceled, burned, censored, left and right. Now, this has always been the case, but it has really ramped up in the last 20 months or so. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to me that this is happening. I see monsters coming at literature from a lot of different directions. Well, for one thing, speaking large, the humanities and the liberal arts are in a complete crisis right now. In 1968, when I was a little boy, 20% of the students in this country taking colleges degrees and university degrees were humanities majors. Now that's less than 1%. It is an absolute crisis time, and we're very near to arriving at a time where we're simply not going to have English majors, history majors, theology majors, people studying art and music. Everything's collapsing, and it's really sad to me. There's a global effort going on too that I don't fully understand, that's hard on literature. I was fired over Harold Bloom's Western Canon. When that principal came along to try to turn my old high school into an international baccalaureate school, I said, "Oh, no you don't, no you don't." And I stood up and caused a little bit of a fuss, because it was heartbreaking for me to think that a curriculum from Geneva, Switzerland would be foisted on my high school. And what that really meant was that when I got fired, everybody got fired. Aeschylus got fired, Sophocles, Euripides, St. Augustine, Chaucer, Dante, Shakespeare, Faulkner, Hemingway. All of the great canonical writers exited that building with me. And now the kids there are reading a list of books I don't even recognize who the authors are. I would suggest too that, that was my son blipping in, sorry, my younger boy. Another monster coming after literature. When we're not toppling statues, we're burning books. I would watch out for the entertainment industry. Free editorial remark, free opinion. I got lots of advice. I would be careful. Watch what you consume in terms of music, art, television, and movies, especially coming out of California. It is increasingly violent, increasingly pornographic. I know you're going to be watching horror movies because it's Halloween. I would be very, very careful. It's just a crass money grab. And particularly in the pandemic, we turned towards our screens and consumed an awful lot of entertainment that was pointless and a waste of time. As far as I'm concerned, a waste of time. I've got to turn that messaging thing off. My son is visiting a church and he wants me to know about it. Also got my older boy's dog here too. You might hear him a little bit. Wilbur the Wonder Dog, incredibly expensive and beautiful French bulldog. I get to have a Wilbur weekend because my son's going to a wedding. Can you tell I have ADHD and I'm not on any medication? Focusing. Literature's in trouble, and I'm going to come to its rescue. So there you go. That's what I wanted you to know about that. And I value great literature. I value the classics. I value masterpieces. And I'm not going to stop talking about the importance of making beauty part of our lives. If we don't carve a little time out for it, I don't know what. We'll be sad and not as joyful. Beauty is a great source of joy. 17-minute mark. Did I talk about everything I wanted? I think I did. I got a little lesson plan here. Just drew it up this morning. One more thing that I want to put before you today. I asked my students in my 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock sections. My 9 o'clock class, I love them to death, but whoa, are they quiet. Spooky quiet. One of the quietest classes I've had at CLC. My 10 o'clock class is larger, and wow, are they loud. They come in, and it's like, okay, this is a change. They want to talk to me. It's okay, I'll get that 9 o'clock crew broke in right around Christmas. But I asked both classes the other day, have you ever thought of yourself as a member of a generation? And they were kind of blinking about it a little bit, and then they kind of started warming up to the idea, and I was like, okay, what is it? What do you stand for? And they rattle off a few things. Well, we stand for we're more open-minded. We are tragically entitled. We're into social media. We have hookup culture. And a little bit of self-loathing started up, and that's okay. And I also made some personal remarks about my generation. I told them that before the pandemic, I said something in the classroom, and some kid kind of crossed their arm and went, okay, boomer. I didn't quite know what that meant. And my students let me know yesterday that that was a straightforward insult, somebody trying to make me feel like a dinosaur. And I am a dinosaur. It's all right. I'm a member of the baby boom generation. The baby boom generation was born historically between all the babies who were born between 1945 and 1960 in this country comprised the baby boomer generation, biggest generation ever. When all those soldiers came home from World War II, they had to do something with their, sublimate their aggression. And some lovemaking ensued, and a whole bunch of babies got born. I've never felt part of them because I was born just 1 month before the 60s began. So I've never identified with them or felt quite part of them. But you guys know this, right? The entire country's economy is geared to my generation or the generation that's just ahead of me. When I was little, we wanted BB guns and coonskin hats. And we wanted Spider-Man comics, and we wanted arena rock. And now, a few decades in the future, moving towards the Toon Boom, we're pretty much into knee replacements and super swanky retirement communities. Why am I talking in this way? I'm talking in this way because we are going to be reading in the weeks ahead writers that were part of something called, famously, the Lost Generation. I don't know why that is still dinging. I am sorry. I'm trying to close this. I can just turn the volume down. The Lost Generation writers were born between 1897 and 1900. In that little breath of years, these writers were born. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Malcolm Cowley, William Faulkner, Kenneth Burke, Thomas Wolfe, Catherine Ann Porter, Thornton Wilder. As far as I'm concerned, the greatest writers that this country has ever produced. And this means a couple of things. It means that these writers that I'm going to put before you, and name is absolutely crucial to know and understand if you want to know anything about this country. They were the perfect age for soldiering because World War I started in 1917. It also means that these writers, when they were just a little bit older than some of you, lived through something that my students at CLC didn't seem to know very much about the other day. And that is the great pandemic, the great flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919, which killed planet-wide tens of millions of people horribly. It killed, unlike COVID, which went after older people, that flu pandemic went after children. It went after tiny children. And you could prove this by walking into any graveyard in central Minnesota. Walk to a graveyard and try to look around. And you'll see if you can find those old limestone markers from the early, from that period. Look at those years, 1917, 1918, 1919. You'll see entire families of children died within a matter of weeks and months, and they died horribly. And now I'm returning in thought to the fall of 2019, where I was standing in my classroom, my beloved classroom, saying pretty much these same things to these students. And I let them know, okay, you guys, we have a flu pandemic about every 80 years. They're always coming at us. Shakespeare wrote King Lear on lockdown in London. Almost no one knows that. They had a pandemic that year, 1605. Every 80 years I told them we have a pandemic. And I also looked them in the eyes gently and said, we're due. You guys were due. I also remember telling them that I had the idea, to this minute, that I told them it had been on my heart for some time. I told those October of 2019 students that I felt something definitive and epic and not necessarily good was about to happen to all of us. And they were just sitting there blinking, and a few months later, they were all sending me emails. I'm no prophet. Trying to tell the future is illegal for me. But they sent me emails to let me know, Johnson, you called it. You totally called it. Look what's happening to us. Look what is still happening to us. And so these writers are a big deal to me. This is the last video of the weekend. I got to turn and read essays from my other two Comp 1 sections. I think I made everything almost perfectly clear. And thanks for putting up with me. Dressed a little bit more casually today. Hope you're okay with that. I try to look like a teacher most of the time. I also today tried to deploy some anti-aging apps. And well, I'll check the tape as I review the footage. I don't think I look a day over 60, but we'll see how they work. I love you guys, even though I don't even know you yet. I'm getting to know you. Bye.